All right, let's talk about Minnesota. There's so many things we could bring up over the weekend that occurred. Two I want to highlight. First of all, Don Lemon went into a St. Paul church, and that may be on your radar or not, but all I can tell you is that is one of many things that happened over the weekend that has the right fired up and believing that the left is going to screw this up. That as much as people like Eric Erickson and others, including Republican members of Congress, some publicly, some privately, think that this images coming out of Minnesota are bad politics. There's plenty happening that they think is good politics, and they're happy to have the fight. On the other hand, lots of Republicans are now saying, some to me, they say, Mark, do you think the polls are right? These polls can't be right. They're looking for all these excuses to deny poll after poll, including more over the weekend, that show the shooting is people are upset about the shooting, and people are very unhappy with ICE, and people believe consistently that ICE is not making people safer. Here's the headline from the Washington Post. And again, folks, if you're on the left, on the right, and you want to say, oh, it's the Washington Post talking about fake polls, I'm telling you, private Republican polls show the same thing. Voters oppose ICE amid shootings in Minneapolis, polls show. As President Trump cracks down on immigration in Minneapolis, a majority of voters disapprove of immigration and custom enforcement's work. That is just a fact. That's not fake news. It's not fake polls. It's a reality. So both sides have things to point to that suggest that this story is not going away anytime soon. Yemisi, what is happening next in Minnesota? Which strands will dominate this week?
Well, we've reached the point of any kind of political hoopla where people who don't even live in the city and the state are now joining for the content. And I think Don Lemon going to be boots on the ground is a sign of the rising outside voices that are going to come in and kind of muddy the waters. I do not think what happened with Don Lemon and the church was helpful whatsoever to a lot of the work that I think Governor Tim Walz and the mayor have been doing to help de-escalate. When they say, go home every night, do not feed into the rhetoric, please do not engage in anything violent. I think disrupting a church service was not helpful. I don't understand what the purpose of it is. And I think this is the part of any kind of social protest where it starts to spiral. This happened with Black Lives Matter, where now we had all of these people who are a bit more professional in nature when it comes to social commentary coming in, joining, not a part of the community, and I don't think helping move anything forward. Don Lemon will leave tomorrow? Maybe he's already left. He'll leave tomorrow, next week. I fail to see what was helpful about his engagement there.
Well said,
Yeah,
Larry.
I think it was clarifying. It's one of those moments where a lot of times these issues come down to whose side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of the people who go and interrupt people in the middle of their church worship on Sunday and start screaming at them, or do you want to be on the side of the worshipers? And I'll take that argument any day of the week. The polls, it's interesting. One of the big polls that I saw over the weekend was CBS News YouGov, I think, and the question was, is ICE making communities safer? Which, and then 51% said no. What's interesting to me is they're never asked, do the professional disruptors and agitators who are getting in the way of ICE carrying out their job make the community safer? I'd love to see the answer to that poll question. I'd like to see that question asked in a poll. I think if Republicans who might be concerned about the images, and it's not great politics, it isn't, but worse politics is retreating and pulling back and saying, okay, never mind, we're not going to enforce immigration laws in that state as long as enough people take to the streets and cause disruptions. What they need to do is focus on the actual arrests that are being made and the deportations made. Over 2,000 have been deported from that area, criminals, including gang members, including people who are wanted for murder. They need to focus on that because that's not what Tim Walz and Mayor Frey have done. And Yemisi, I mean, as much as you like the fact that they've now suddenly said, don't go out, go home at night, don't cause any violence. That wasn't their first message. They were adamantly, riling up the mobs at the beginning. And also the mob right now, or the rioters, they're not heeding their advice. They're still out there every night, regardless of whether Tim Walz said go home and don't go out there at night. They're still out there and they're still wreaking havoc and they're still causing dangerous situations and vandalizing the city. So what's the point of them saying something if no one listens? That's not leadership.
Yeah,
I think it also, I don't think that Governor Tim Walz was riling people up to be outside in the streets. I think he's actually played it, in comparison, especially to the mayor, Jacob Frey, I think he's played it very, very neutral, especially from months ago, where he spent a lot of 2025 being a main messenger of riling folks up.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
think
Missy, forgive me. He was invoking Gettysburg and the Civil War with his rhetoric the first day after the incident last week.
I think the first day after the incident, emotions were at an all-time high, and he's done a very
Okay.
good job since that tempering. So I'm going to give credit where it's due. I think, especially the situation with Don Lemon, I just watched and I thought, okay, this undermines if a lot of the community is saying to us as Christians, we believe in compassion, then the antithesis of that is interrupting a church service because what was it? The pastor is like an ice field day. Well, that has nothing to do with the congregation. And when I'm watching that video, I watched the entire live stream with Don Lemon. I'm watching children in the congregation crying. And so what does it do? It, just like you said, it creates these lines of what side do you want to be on. And we're also seeing videos of people harassing people inside of coffee shops because they appear to be ICE agents because they have
Right.
rental cars in the air. We are losing the plot. And it's a little bit of a repeat of what I saw all those years ago with BLM. We're devolving a little bit, and I just think folks got to get a handle if you
Yep.
still want the message to come through.
Well said. So, Kristi Noem, Secretary Noem, was spoofed again on Saturday Night Live. Neither side on this has a monopoly on not telling the truth, but she has been particularly promiscuous in making public statements that don't bear out every time. And she is a senior government official. She's a big face of this operation. And I think just as regardless of party, it would be better for people to be more careful. So here's a headline from the New York Times, 116. She was on Face the Nation. Denies use of chemical agents in Minnesota, then backtracks, said officers had not used pepper spray and similar measures limited by a judge's order, then was confronted with a video that showed chemical agents deployed. Here's a bit of that from Face the Nation 117, please.
Your agent's going to
I know
comply
the
with
White House has asked him to.
with the federal order on Friday to not use chemical agents.
That federal order was a little ridiculous because that federal judge came down and told us we couldn't do what we already aren't doing. We
just saw
have not
video of chemical
engaged
agents
in
being used.
We only use those chemical agents when there's violence happening and perpetuating, and you need to be able to establish law and order to keep people safe. That's the only situation. So that judge's order didn't change anything for how we're operating on the ground because it's basically telling us to do what we've already been doing.
Okay, it's hard to calculate this, but in the great abacus in your mind, you have to see, is she, as a public spokesperson for this in Minnesota, is she a net positive as a spokesperson, net positive or net negative politically?
Negative.
Negative. Why?
Negative. And I've said this time and time again. I do not think she is the right face for a deconstructed organization like DHS that has multiple other agencies under it, like FEMA and ICE. I've said again and again, I believe executive style leadership can come from other Republicans like a Glenn Youngkin. Yeah. I just think there are more level-headed people that are better at communicating this, especially in places like CBS on CNN than a Kristi Noem.
Larry, is she a good spokesperson, net?
Well, to be fair, and I just want to comment on that clip real fast, because one of the things that people should do when they're spokespeople for an organization or for a government agency, especially at times like this, is to be as clear and thorough as possible. That federal judge's order was not just about chemical agents. It specifically said that they can't use these tactics against peaceful protesters. And so when Secretary Noem said, we're already not doing that, what she should have said is what I just said, which is the federal judge's order had to do with peaceful protesters, and all the peaceful protesters are being left alone. We are using, legal, lawful interventions against people who are not being peaceful, and that's where this comes in. It made it look like she was saying, "Oh, we're not using chemical agents."
In general, one word answer, Larry, is she a net positive spokesperson or net negative?
I think right now Tom Homan is the most positive spokesperson for that.
And I will give you that, Larry. I think they need to push Tom
Homan
out more than Kristi Noem.
Larry, what a dodge. Is she net positive or net negative?
I don't have a good feel for that. I'll be honest with you. I know who's good, not who's bad.
All right.
They say that something that's easy is like a walk in the park. Well, easier than a walk in the park, hit the subscribe button, be part of the two-way community, never miss an episode, be part of our conversations. Thank you for your service to America.
And don't forget, you can now listen to the morning meeting and Two-Way Tonight on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.